Welcome to Chew the Chat Podcast.
Now that makes perfect sense because that's just one clap captured on both devices, isn't it?
Supposedly.
There we go.
That's the thinking.
You're looking smoother now. You're looking much smoother now, Chris.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'd like to say it's because I've had a trim up before you, Sam. But no, I'm literally looking vagrant at the moment.
So how have you been then? What have you been up to, and what's happening with you? And obviously podcasting, we're going to get into all that, but
yeah,
you know,
I'm good, man. What have I been up to since our? Well, I tell you what. Since our last chat, I've watched a lot of the documentaries you recommended.
Oh, cool.
So I've just sat there thinking what ones I watch. The ones that come straight to mind are Wild Wild Country and Three Identical Strangers.
Yeah.
And I'm sure one of them that you told me I'd already watched, but my brain...
That was it, Surfwise. Surfwise.
Surfwise is the one I still haven't bloody seen. No, Surfwise I have seen.
You have seen, yeah.
What are the other two?
The other two, you'd seen, obviously, Zeitgeist, because that's a staple for anybody.
Yeah.
And then we talked about a couple of the honourable mentions. That one of them was Abducted, the one, which is another Netflix one, where the guy, the next door neighbour, kind of takes the little girl and he tells her she's been impregnated by aliens and all sorts of stuff.
Madness.
Lockdown fodder, that is.
But thanks for the recos, because they were really good. Wild Wild Country just sort of like...
I thought you'd enjoy that. Yeah, I thought you'd enjoy that. Knowing what I know from listening to you, from your podcast over time, and, I thought I found that amazing back then, in that day and age, that those people found each other and communicated and got it going like they did. I thought it was amazing.
Meanwhile, I think because I watched it with my missus, and I think we nearly joined.
Yeah, got a red t-shirt out.
And yeah, exactly. And even towards the end, I was kind of like, there was quite a lot of strong, good ideas of that. But it's quite funny that, and for people who don't know Wild Wild Country, go and watch it. But it's effectively about, without saying much, it's about a guru, an Indian guru called Rajneesh, who sets up a commune. He's very successful in India, but they decide to basically buy some territory in America and set up this whole commune and the neighbours aren't too happy about it. It is so brilliant because you can see how I think errors were made, but I think they did pretty good. I think they made some mistakes in how they set that commune up, like in communicating with their neighbours for starters. And then sort of like the age-old absolute power corrupts absolutely started to come in a little bit with some of the people who were first among equals, let's say,
yes.
And were sort of like taking advantage of their situation. It's absolutely fascinating.
Sheila was some beast, isn't she?
She is, and wow, what charisma!
Yeah,
and I truly believe that she believes everything that she's saying, and I kind of understand a lot of her motives, not all, but yeah, it's fucking such a good.
I think that point you make there, Chris, is that's what I always find fascinating, is that the idea. My wife's often saying to me at the minute, she's like, she probably had the same vibe as you and your girlfriend there. Like, there must be a way when we're sort of digging into getting up to speed with where we are in the world at the moment. I've got 3 young kids. The way things are going in schools are kind of, so difficult for us to digest what's happening with our children, what they're being taught at 5 years old. Yeah. And my wife said to me, there must be a way we just need to start our own commune. We need to start. And I'm like, yeah, but the thing is, it'll go one or two ways. We'll just get crushed by the government. You can't do it in this country because you can't get the land. You just got to live by the rules, else they'll find you. And if we do pull it off somewhere, it's just going to turn into a crazy sex cult. That's it.
It always ends up in a sex cult. I know there's not many guys who would find themselves at the top of that, not turning it into a sex cult.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot about human nature. We're very angry at the nature of humans.
Yeah.
And yet I think people absolutely forget that they are one, and that I think we all like to think that we are these creepy pieces of shit, but I suspect many of us would go that way, and you'd be a bit like Sheila. You blind yourself to it, because your ego's doesn't want to change it. It's beneficial to you, so
it becomes religious almost, doesn't it? It becomes religious.
Absolutely, man. I mean, me and Pip wrote a script about 18 months ago. We really liked it, and it's for a series. We planned out the whole thing, and later on, after into season 2.5 onwards, we started coming up with different ways that people could politically align. And we were saying it was more people's alignments isn't by country, it's by ideology. And the wars started breaking out as a result of that. And we found that really, really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to do that, mate. I really would. But I definitely, you see Wild Wild Country and you're thinking, mate, maybe starting a commune's just going to end up with me on some sort of in the docks going, I was in an impossible situation, Your Honour.
What would you do? Well, we are at a strange time, aren't we? And that idea, I think people are sat in front of their televisions after their day at work, or maybe another day in the house, and people are thinking, where is this going? What is the future going to look like? Because if it does go down the route that, for instance, a BBC or a Sky News are kind of having you believe, then you're getting sort of subconsciously, subliminally, you're prepping for to be going down that road, and other people are trying to find alternative routes, and it's a really confusing time, and it's gonna it's a time where we are going to have to sort of look at ourselves with a little bit more introspection and a little bit more thought about where we are heading individually and collectively. What do you think? How do you feel?
I'd say that there's a lot of agendas at the moment, and actually not all of them aren't, because people aren't trying in people's best interests, and some obviously won't be, even if they're masters that. And you know what, Sam, the weird thing is I think after about 8 weeks, and then we had the black the issues that and the Black Lives Matter obviously supporting what had happened to George out in America. I'm probably saying George and massacring his name, as you know, I conflate everyone's name completely, but I started to see just so much conjecture and opinions and shouting at each other. I just I had a lot of people that I had to be personally responsible for who were quite vulnerable. And I was kind of like, I'm going to use some of this time to self-grow and develop. And I have with my beard, I've just let it go. But actually, I turned on to doing lots more reading and re-educating myself and exercise. And I just wanted to do that for a while things started to be a bit clearer. And, it's a really tough time, man.
That's a really wise way of spending that time, though. I've tried to do the same as well, reconnecting with some knowledge, with some understanding, seeking a bit of knowledge, seeking some wider perspective of your own, and certainly keeping your body moving, keeping that energy and trying to keep health in check.
Yeah, I think you need to, physical health does assist with mental health.
There's massively.
Deep connections to that. I think I'm going to need to start peeking my head out the parapet again. I mean, again, even things like the US elections, it's an important time, and I think you can completely dial out of it, but I think there's something to be said for balance and responsibility. And I do think, in terms of politically, I think there's only too long I could show a degree of apathy for a period for my own sanity, but also you get the rulers that you deserve, not that you need. And I think lots of our failings in this country is that enough of us don't make an effort to really understand as much as you can the workings and the agendas of the people who run our country, whether that be in government or through business. So.
No, I'm the same. I've just popped my head up. I've been sort of blissfully, if I can use that term, but I guess I can, because of me, my wife, my kids, we've managed, because of the circumstances that we live in anyway, to stay reasonably close to what it is we normally do, and the last couple of weeks, a couple of things happening in the personal life anyway, with business and things and podcast growing and things happening where things are busy and they get on top. I injured my back, so physically I was like, a bit immobile. And then I started to look in. I thought, right, like yourself, I better dip my head in and actually catch up with what's being said out there, because you hear bits of hearsay, and I'm trying to keep distance with social media as much as I can. So I went online and just did my own bit of digging again. And yeah, I struggled with it a little bit, to be honest, Chris. Reading both sides of the and kind of trying to find whatever that harmonious truth is to me. Really difficult, because the whole kind of it feels like all politics and everything at the moment. It's almost as if you just have to be hard left, hard right. You just can't be like, hang on a minute, no, there's some truth in what's happening, but there's also some agendas that are happening underneath things that we need to pay attention to. So it's got me a little bit down, actually.
Oh, mate, I really see that. Sorry about the back stuff, firstly.
No, thank you. No.
That sucks. But so a lot of this is what's stemmed my personal learning again, because I kind of was getting a bit tight. I guess kind of my background in some parts of my work I've done has always been about dispute resolution and understanding how to be absolutely neutral, regardless of my background or persuasions, being able to see things just from both sides. And I'd sit there, and I was getting a bit stuck into social media towards the start of the COVID thing. And I just realised how crazy everyone was with their arguments. And what I kind of thought was, I think what there's a fundamental lack of, and I don't really see anyone's immediate fault, it's how we're brought up, but we don't really know how to think clearly or concisely. Because thinking's a very complicated thing, but it's a skill that can be learned. And so that's what I've gone on to be teaching myself. And it's been incredible to see and understand how old new thinking came about. Like what we use as thinking mostly across the world now, especially in the West, is all based on stuff that the three main philosophers like Aristotle and Socrates and Plato brought about. They brought it about, then they went into the dark ages of Rome, it all got lost, and then after that it all started coming up. And what I found was a massive part of their line of thinking was all about argument. But there's loads of problems with argument, because when you engage in argument, you put yourself on one side immediately, and then your ego attaches with it, and then there's the idea of loss or losing. And that's why you see half the time, I do it myself sometimes, I find myself getting pulled into an argument, and I might be saying things, and maybe I'm stretching myself a little too far, because I don't want to, I want to ram my point home.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not productive. And when you talk about left and right, we're always doing this binary sort of thinking, and there's always sides, and people push themselves into tribes and they won't talk around whatever the issue is they have with the other side. I watched a YouTube debate not that long ago, and it was I hadn't watched one in honestly probably about 18 months, and it was typical right left arguments about affect really healthcare and socialist and more free market beliefs. And one of these people was trying to raise the point that the other guy was really smart, but sometimes he quotes facts and figures, and there's a counter to it that the guy who quoted the facts and figures didn't bother to disclose it. So they're not being intellectually honest, because they just wanted to win the argument.
Yep. And
this other person, who happened to be on the sort of like socialist side of things, was trying to say, look, if you knew that other information, why he couldn't articulate why the other guy wouldn't do that. He was trying to say, look, why are we arguing? Aren't we trying to come to the solution of ensuring that people get healthcare in the most effective way? So, but the other guy said, and all the other debate team said, why would he put forward your arguments? Why would he argue your point for you? And I think that's the perfect example is we're obsessed with arguing and winning arguments. And that was at the highest level. There was thousands of people at this debate, and yet they still are stuck in argument mode. And that's just one thing. I won't keep going on about it, but that's one thing I've started to unlearn about how I use my brain and when I should be using my emotions to drive my behaviours, or be aware of what my emotions are telling me, but being able to separate them from sometimes thinking lucidly about a situation and clearly about a situation. I think it's fantastic, man. So that's what I took from it, mate. That's why I had to take a step away, because I just figured I don't even know if I've got anything worth contributing here. So I'm going to go and teach myself how to think a bit better.
I feel that absolutely wholeheartedly, and that's how I started to feel about social media. You know, I started to kind of see that pattern in social media because I was really quite vocal, you know, and as we kind of alluded to a little bit on when I did. Chris, I need to fucking introduce you. I came on your podcast, I was about to say. So, Chris Glasson, aka the Gold Touch.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a super fan of your podcast, Hardcore Listing. I've been a big fan since day one, since I first came across you on Scroobius Pip, the Scroobius Pip's Distraction Pieces podcast, back in 2015 or something like that. I think you first was on there.
Must be.
So firstly, thank you for your time. We've been straight in on the chat, but I'll obviously introduce you on the introduction anyway. But no, when I came on Hardcore Listening, I did my top 5, and I did the documentaries, and one of which was Zeitgeist, which was obviously a film in, I think, 2007, somewhere like that, which lifted the lid for a lot of people on there might be other sort of narratives to consider, other than the ones we're sort of, you know, brought through the mainstream culture. And I started to notice around the time of watching that, maybe a little bit after, in social media, that I was guilty of it, because I became somebody who was sort of getting my point across in a Facebook feed. Yeah. You know, and getting 10, 20 comments in and feeling the heat a little bit, feeling the like, oh, you know, out of the 4 guys that have got this far, he's really intelligent and he's got some salient points. But, you know, I'm passionate about, you know, and then you get the anxiety and he's sent, you know, and you're checking your phone and the missus is like, are you watching this? And I'm like, hang on. You know, and then I started to be able to like sort of zoom out of myself and see myself doing that, and then recognising the pattern. And thinking, hang on a minute, everybody here has just got their fucking flag in the ground and they're just fucking standing by their own, and we're not here to actually come to resolution. It's to win.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, it's to win. And it's such a good point. I think there's so many problems that we've got at the moment that clarity of thinking would do us all a fucking favour. And we don't need any more technology for that. We don't need the government to do that for us. What we need to do is we can just do that ourselves. Because if we've like that, there's less bullshit that these other people can push past us. And you'll fall for less bullshit as a result of it. It's like, to solve some of the issues that we've got in this day and age, I don't think the solution is that issue. I think if we can get better at other issues, it makes those things disappear. But they'll no longer be arguments. And I think having clarity of thought and thinking better, and talking around situations and subjects, actually thinking of possible solutions and possibilities, as crazy as they seem, it has always proven throughout time to be how we've invented shit. Either by luck or by going, what if? And there's so many things that we constantly debate over in this day and age, where it's hard to find what the root cause is sometimes. And even if you do find it, you can't stop that root cause sometimes. And actually, really, instead of looking at that, look at and blaming each other and thinking that you're not capable of whatever that other party is doing, because often you end up doing the same, is work together to go to find a possible solution that everyone sort of agrees on. I think we always talk about multiculturalism as in a society, and I can't remember who said this. I think it was Majid Nawaz, who used to be on LBC. I don't know if he still is. He's got an interesting life story, that chap. But he said omniculturalism is an interesting concept. Think of the things that we all share. Because most of the time when you look at any ways we debate or argue, a lot of the time we're all trying to get normally the same thing, which is freedom and free from suffering from people, you know, and people to have a better quality of life. We just had vastly different opinions on how people should be treated. And so I think, anyway. No,
I'm with you.
I could go on about that for ages.
Well, you know, we're podcasting, but I coming back to that pattern that you pointed, like I sort of, that was however many years ago when I started to recognise my own input into the fucking, I call it the void, the digital void, where everybody gets home from their kind of, most of us are doing jobs that we're not in love with. You know, we've had a long day, we've had a bit of road rage, we're late, we're hungry. You know, we get online and we get into it about Boris or whatever it is. You know, we make our point, and there's a couple of people that are always there, you know, he's always there with his point, you know, and everybody's little digital Facebook world or whatever it is, has got its own little kind of tailored, you know, vibe to you with it, you know. And I can remember thinking, man, no, this is all wrong, and I'm contributing to it. So here's me trying to make, I was kind of trying to make the point that you're saying, which is like, shouldn't we all be trying to find a resolution here? And actually there's a point to what you're saying, and there's a point to what he's saying. That's my point. And then I realised that I'm just making a fucking point, and everybody's making points, and nobody really cares. So what is the answer? The answer is come away. For me, it was like, come away from this. You know, just live my life. Definitely. The points I'm trying to make, actually physically try and live them in my life, you know, completely. Be more compassionate and try and be more open and honest, and not have to tell everybody everything. I just did this, I just did kettlebells, I just you know, like, just let it be. And where we are today, I feel like when I'm looking at social media now, and I'm looking at the issues we're faced with at the moment, the whole censorship thing that's happening, the Me Too thing that's sort of, you know, that was bubbling for the last couple of years. People are scared to death to say anything, you know, we're offending everybody. It's like, I just feel like our little hard drives in our cortex, our little prefrontal cortex that's got to process all of this madness, can only cope with, it's not supposed to cope with.
It's not supposed to. All
of this data, all of these information, all the ideas, and this carnage over in that country, and these amazing people with amazing bodies, you know, like, we haven't got the space. No. Are you aware of Dunbar's number?
Is this how many people you're supposed to know?
Yeah.
Or you can potentially keep in your
exactly.
recollection?
Yeah, sort of between 100 to 150.
Exactly.
And from there, that's your ability to compassionately, empathetically, and be understood, and not be with fear or any kind of anxiety about the faces, the people, the connections, the communications you're having. After that, you know, anthropology says that groups and tribes split up, and that was it.
Yeah. It makes, all of that makes sense anyway, and it makes sense to keep things on a smaller level anyway, because groups can be managed more effectively smallly because they know what's best for them. And that's the problem with big government, is that it doesn't allow for autonomy or differences from town to town, person to person. And so, I completely agree with that. The brain frazzles out on it, and I make no fucking effort with it, Sam, as well. Like, I don't any longer. Like, and I'm much happier for it.
So have you stepped away? Happier. Have you stepped away from social media, other than having to do your bits for your work?
Other than business, baby, it is all business. There is not, like, my girlfriend's kind of the opposite.
Yep.
And she'll be like, oh, for fuck's sake, I've got to get away from it. And it's not like I haven't been there. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? I've done it. We both, you know, as you just said, we've all done it. But there's absolutely no value to it at all. It is useful. You can get information. You can get inspiration. We're looking at buying a place, looking at how to decorate it. Hopefully more exciting than this spare room that I'm in at the moment. I'm looking at yours and I'm thinking, you're doing brilliant, mate.
This is a specifically designed space for this. You know, you're doing, you know, wonderful things where you are, so there's no drama there.
But it's I just think that it's not necessary. And I don't know. I just that I'm not saying, I think freedom's about doing what you want to do. I ain't saying anyone else has to do anything they want to do. I'd say listen to the pearl of great price that's inside of you, telling you what you like and what you enjoy, and don't let any of this other shit drown your that thought and feeling out and that activity out. Just do that. And if that activity is you really do like social media, and you don't get creeping paranoia or, you know, all this other shit, like, not paranoia, anxiety or confusion over all these what people are arguing about, then fine, use it. If not, like me, step away. And have you ever looked back at your points? Like go back 3 years and read what you've written?
Chris. Oh, I have. You know, and I'm at a point now, I like to think anyway, and I feel like it, you know, I try and be as honest and brutal with myself as I possibly can. Yeah, and if I was to open up an old Facebook account and log in and go to it, right, then yeah, my toes would curl up over me fucking head, you know. But I look at it and I go, okay, I can rationally look at this because I can look at the stages, the chapters of my life, you know, totally. And whether or not I think I had a good intention or whether I was just a jumped up squirt who thought he knew best, you know, it's in my personality to be loud, and I've been in bands since I was a kid. I'm doing this podcast now. I obviously want to be heard, you know, but I can look at stuff now and I can go, yeah, I was 23 years old and I'd just watched whatever I'd watched, you know, Zeitgeist, or I'd just read, you know, and I had a point to make, and I look at that now and I think, well, did I learn? Because if I'm still in that pattern, if I'm still kind of making those kinds of assertions and so on, then maybe I need to have another word. But no.
Well, that's really interesting, man. Because if you, like, this is a strange thing, this is quite paradoxical, but if you look back and you were like, yep, stand by that, are you growing? And then does that mean that you had it sussed at 23? But I think people, and myself and my own actions and behaviours, many of them are disgusting. Like I do kind of forgive myself for them, because it's not like I go around like murdering, killing stray animals and like, oh, well, I'm a human. Yeah. Some of us go wrong. Yeah. I'm not like that. I always hold myself accountable. I think that's really important to do that and not turn away from the dumb shit I've done. But I'm also capable of genuinely forgiving myself for it.
I get that. I get that from you.
Yeah.
Even when you're joking and telling the Craig stories and stuff like that, which are, you know, they're anecdotal, not to say, you know, allegedly that, you know.
Yeah, but, not me, obviously.
No, I think that's a great little vessel the way you do that, because we've all got a Craig. We've all got that version of us when we were at uni, when we were younger, you know, when we'd done things that maybe today that we could go, oh, maybe that was a bit crackers. But I think you've nailed it. When you are young, I think if you're underneath all of that, if your intention and if your moral compass is always somewhere towards the good, you know, those crazy things we do and the drunken madness and the, you know, that all falls in line in the end. Because the goodwill's out, doesn't it? You know, but I think if you are kidding yourself and making your excuses and kind of justifying things, and you're a bit of a victim and the world's pushed me this way anyway, then it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah,
you know?
Completely, dude. I used to manage teams. I don't really bother now, and as a result, but I don't care. I'm a better manager these days than I ever was. But I learned so many of these things by watching my staff. And I learned lessons myself, hard lessons about human beings as well. And that sometimes doing everything for them and listening to everything they said, I was breeding selfishness in my teammate members. They were lazier and they were unhappy. They were less happy than when I was more down the line with them. And I'm not saying being, you know, a tyrant in the office, but also the thing I used to find with people is that, like, self-development. There's people who are always wanting to say, well, no, that didn't happen because of that, or that wasn't my fault because of that. I think I'm lucky enough that my dad has always said, like, and I've gone to my dad in some real messes in the past and been like, oh, Dad, this has happened. And my dad literally would always go, so how much of that is your fault? And I'd be like, fuck it. I used to get annoyed at him when he used to say it to me. And then I kind of started understanding that half the time I was getting worked up and angry, blame storming everyone else, finger pointing. And actually, if I really, really think about it and look deeply at myself and quietly and take the ego away, it was my problem. I did something. And, you know, so maybe I should calm down. And also, once you realise that, you can learn to forgive yourself, and then your attitude changes as well.
Yeah,
you don't act like
and then you don't. Yeah, and you don't end up in that situation so much. And I think you've absolutely nailed it there, because that's something I do. I've found myself practicing and preaching to my kids, which is be brutally honest with yourself, because we do manifest those situations. I just sort of alluded to it when I'm on my Facebook, you know, get this, that and the other, finding myself, you know, going back and forth and realising, oh yeah, but I'm pushing, you know, I'm pushing people's backs here because I'm trying to express a point and I'm getting aggro about it and I'm not articulate about it, and I'm right and you're wrong and you need to, you know, and you don't realise the nuance of people's lives, perspectives, but for me to actually look at myself and realise that was what I was doing, and not just say, yeah, well, everybody's reading The Sun and so fuck them, you know, like, no.
Yeah.
No, like, actually, what am I doing? How am I doing this? How am I communicating here? Like, actually, yeah. You know, and even silly little things, you know, getting parking tickets, a little slew of getting parking tickets one year. I got like 6 parking tickets. That's fucking, why you know, you can't park anywhere. And, you know, and realise, well, actually, you know, whether or not I like the rules, they are the rules. And, you know, if I don't want this stress, just park somewhere officially and safely and soundly, you know. But looking at yourself, that is the trick. Just, and then you set yourself free. I believe that.
Oh, it's so true. Like, the worst things you did, be honest with yourself and accept them. And then once you've done that, the first person human beings can normally forgive is themselves. I'm not trying to sit here saying this is a selfish thing. This is a self-defense thing. When you look at anthropology, it's the same reason why we get over deaths and tragedy. Right? We have to. Once you drive your fucking self mad. So there's an inherent behaviour you've got to forgive yourself in your own blood, first and foremost. You can forgive anyone. Or forget forgiving, as Pip once said, which is a fucking really good point. Like, because we're all gonna do shit, so let's just stop worrying about pointing the finger at everyone.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just a note when you said about your kids, like I love having a little Insta stalk of you, Sam. Like we're giving like the things, like when you guys are doing stuff for your kids, I'm like, if I have kids, if I'm lucky enough to do that, I definitely hope and so engage with them. Like I see you do, mate. It's always a good laugh seeing what you guys are getting up
that's
to.
really nice, and that's really my my life's goal now. You know, it's like having been, you know, my Craig was pretty fucking wild as well, you know, and I've had a couple of my old friends sit opposite me in the studio to do a podcast, and they're like, I've literally not seen him for 15, 20 years. And they were like, whoa, what's happened here? Like, you are a different guy. You're the same, but you're different, you know. And they look at a couple of books on the shelf behind me and they go, oh, right, okay. And I said, yeah, you know, I kind of just decided to look at myself, you know, and think, actually, you know, a little bit aggro, a little bit bossy, a little bit in my own way, you know. And then sort of worked on that. That takes a long time. You work on it, and then your kids come along, and then this crazy thing happens, or it happened to me, where, wow, you know, like, I'm getting a second chance in a weird way. Do you know what I mean by that? It's almost like, because the feeling and the responsibility and the connection and the bond is, for me, was such that it was like, right, I've got to get things right for these guys. You know, I've got to I know enough from what I have read that, you know, environment is paramount. You know, the environment you create viscerally, you know, physically, mentally, everything is really important. And as the years are ticking by, my oldest will be 7 in, you know, 4 months. It's gone like that. I've just realised that my most gifted thing now is those moments, is like when we get to go off camping, which has been, I've talked about it a lot on this podcast. We found wild camping. We did conventional camping a lot, but then we found wild camping, sort of stripped it down, stick it in a bag, head off somewhere beautiful and see where we end up. Yeah, amazing. And the kids have really taken to it. And I mean, like, they're hiking through.
You did just for anyone who hasn't listened to you, but you used to have 5 kids, right? But you've lost 2.
Yeah, yeah. But I reckon they'll come back. We'll come across them. They're out there. They've got a bit of kit. They'll survive. But no, they love it. And seeing them, especially now, considering what we've just talked about, because we didn't touch on what social media is doing to kids, doing to young people, doing to the remapping of their brains, their communication, how they perceive each other, themselves. So seeing my kids at a young age out there has been amazing, and it's feeding me. It's feeding me. It literally is. So that's really nice that you say that, because
man, 100%.
that is the thing for me. And you know, I'd love to see how it happens in the end as they get older. You know, you don't wish any time away, but how the patterns do work out for them and what it is they do value. We've had the questions at the minute. The oldest is like, Daddy, I want a Nintendo Switch. Can I get a Nintendo Switch? And I was like, well, yes. They've got a Mega Drive. They've got an old school Mega Drive that we got from eBay. Literally.
Amazing.
And it's got California games and everything. Oh, we've been playing California games.
Incredible.
It's amazing because my wife and I were trying to kind of bridge that gap, where they don't get left behind at school because we can't create, we talked at the start of this podcast, you can't create utopia, we have got to move in this world. We've just got to try and sculpt ourselves as best we can to our values and to, what we deem important, I guess. So we bridge the gap with a Mega Drive and we have like an hour on a Sunday or whenever it is, Street Fighter 2 and all that stuff, and I love it. But he came home the other day and wanted his Nintendo Switch, and I said, okay. And so I didn't want to hear myself saying no and trying to tell him all these things. I just said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, you're a big enough boy now that you could do some jobs for Dad. How about what about washing the car? Or you could help me in the studio. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, and I can pay you pocket money, and you can save it up. And he's like, okay, yeah. What can I do for you, Dad? I said, well, I had him in here cleaning bits and bobs, and then I said, how much is the Switch? He said, I'll ask Mummy, Daddy. Anyway, £400, right? I said, right, okay.
It's going to be working for 10 years.
I said, you can have one, but I didn't say no.
Yeah.
And I've tried to use it as as a vessel for him to understand that whatever the thing is, a Switch or whatever, you want to do the work. If you want to do 10 jobs this week, you'll get paid 10 times.
Yeah.
And then it's up to you.
So
you want to
good.
get one, so
It's behaviour training, right? And I think that I was kind of as a kid, I was relatively spoiled, I would say. I was not a lonely child, but my brother was 18 years older than me. And Mum and Dad were trying for me for ages, didn't think it was going to happen, and I just showed up. And I think I was relatively spoiled. I didn't want for anything. I'm not saying that I was any effort on my dad not to. My dad instilled great values in me, I feel. But I think my mum probably spoiled me a little more. That actually now, certainly from 25, I was like, I've really got to pull my finger out on these things because I know I'm doing things that aren't very positive behaviours and I expect things. And I think that, those sort of behaviours, instilling into your kids really early that if you work for something, it's worth it instead of being given something, it can only make them understand drive and have a better willpower. And I think that's something we don't teach these things really in school. They spend I'm not trying to shit all over the school system completely. They need to understand fundamentals.
Oh, you're so right, yeah.
We go down roads and looking at things that is understanding what an oxbow lake is more important than understanding how to suppress ineffective behaviours in yourself. Simple things, right? Let's look at nose picking. Right, it's a simple young thing that kids will do because they just get into the habit of it. But there's loads of stuff that adults end up, when they get older, having to look at. Why the fuck am I still doing this? Why am I still sucking my thumb? Why do I always do this? Why am I personally a compulsive masturbator? If I had known more about this, if I was taught more about willpower and how about to delay satisfaction and gratification, I'm not just talking about touching yourself being the most obvious acute instance of that. If they taught kids that, you'd have a much better behaved society just on that alone, without telling people about crime and saying if you do something bad you'll go there. If you teach people behaviour these sort of values and willpower and knowing when to listen to your emotions and when not to act on them, and at a younger age, you like I said earlier, the solution might not be trying to deal with telling adults not to steal something, and it might not be about. I actually don't believe what I'm about to say here, so I'm just shooting from here. It might not always be about how the economy is running, whether or not if it's to free market or not. So, I do think that we're missing some big tricks at school. It's nice to hear you doing that, man. It's really,
absolutely. And that's another thing that my wife and I talk about often is sometimes, for instance, they'll bring, and again, I'm not shitting on the schools here, but we are living in 2020 and we are operating on a lot of pretty rigid structure that was put in the ground a long time ago,
Yeah.
So they came home and they were like, talking about healthy food. Now, we're quite conscious about healthy food in the house. We're not eating seeds all day long, we're pizza night and all that, but we are conscious of like trying to minimize processed foods, and we're trying to eat things that have lived, in the ground and on trees and so aware of what that does to your mental health, your physical health, how you sleep, and just to be in some kind of harmony with your mental health, like to have a healthy body, healthy nutrients is really. So the kids are aware of that. They came home from school one day and they'd done something on school, and they're 5 and 4 or 5 at the time. So it's only very, very early stuff, but it was the food chart, and it was still the 5 a day thing, and brown bread is healthy and all these things. And they were a bit confused because they were like, but this isn't healthy, Mummy, Dad. But they're being taught at the school it is. And to your point I'm making is, I do feel like some fundamental human learning has to happen. Like, not just whether the 5 a day is right or what, but like how important it is that you have a healthy body. A healthy body. Healthy body means a healthy mindset, essentially. If you've got good nutrients in your body, healthy food, minerals, nutrients, your whole being works more efficiently. And if
it turns on,
yes,
it switches on, bro. You can't put. I think the best analogy when I used to read about this, best analogy I once saw. I'm sorry to
no, not at all, not at all.
You can't put diesel in a petrol engine.
Yes,
simple as that. So, like all these sweet food and how Western everything into consumer culture is aimed towards your lower, weaker emotions, your base emotions, hunger, whatever. And so everything's sweet or salty for a variety of reasons that just make you buy it to eat it. There's there's no interest in your health in any of that, and hence, but they advertise it to the point of.
Full of vitamin C,
so you have to
full
eat
of vitamin C and full of B12. You can buy a bowl. You can buy a box of Cocoa Pops, and it's literally telling your children. This is just digress quickly, but this is what I find difficult when I have popped my head into the current climate, and people are getting pulled off YouTube or off because they're not following the World Health Organization's guidelines. I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, you guys have okayed writing on children's cereal boxes that this is full of fucking healthy gear. So how is that possible? How is that possible? Because that's something that you touch on there, Chris, that I'm bemused by. Is like, you buy foods, as you've just said, that I already know in my heart that is like, that's been sweetened, it's been coloured, it's had preservatives put in it so it can travel better, last longer, live longer, it's more robust, and you want it. Yeah, of course. But we are selling it to children. You can. I stand in the co-op, and just where I end up stood in my local co-op, I'm right next to the pop aisle. All the pop drinks. Like I'm looking at the Coke, and it's 0 sugar, no sugar, and I'm like, how is that legal? How is that legal? Because it's not the actual word sugar. It's one of the 300, proxy words. Fructose or aspartame or whatever it is. Yeah. How is that legal?
Yeah.
Bringing it to kids, like kids are like, oh, Daddy, can we have these? And they know enough to say, oh, that's vitamin C, Daddy. Yeah, I'm like, well, no, but it isn't, though, darling. Yeah, but it says it. That's really confusing.
It's massively confusing, and I guess there's so many ways you can go with that conversation. It's mind-boggling.
It is.
I guess in terms of a diet for yourself, and you mentioned anthropology and stuff earlier. What I try to do is look at what were we doing 10,000 years ago. What were we eating? Because our bodies, it took a long time for us to get to where we are now with our bodies, because we started as a single cell organism. It takes a long time. And so our bodies are still used to a lot of that other stuff. I'm not saying completely paleo diets and stuff like that, because there's criticisms of that where they say not everyone always agrees on what we were eating that far back. But look, if it's, our bodies certainly just want to eat something raw and fresh. Have you seen that documentary, The Game Changers?
Yeah.
When they're talking about B12, it's like, a lot of the time they're saying, oh, you can only get it in meat. Then they're saying you can get it in vegetables.
Confusing.
And now they're saying, actually, we think it was a lot of the time off the soil that you were eating when you were scrabbling round and chewing on a bloody leek.
Yeah.
So But I do think a lot of what the game changes is definitely, I think I'm sort of gearing myself up to do is become vegetarian. And
are you really?
maybe
Yeah, you're
eventually
going to go for it.
And just personally, I think so. I think what's interesting, and maybe that appealed to my selfish nature in the game changers, and I was saying this to Molly, is that it is definitely a what's in it for me way of talking about vegetarianism. It isn't. It does talk about the environment in it, but I think it does a really good job of putting a case forward for why really these myths of eating meat are good, just definitely the way you can get your protein are bullshit, and they are. They genuinely are. So I think that from a selfish perspective, and I've had this guilt for probably about 3 or 4 years now, where I've managed to be vegetarian and indeed vegan for periods, but I've not been able to quite get over the line and sustain it. So I think I've flirted with it enough now to.
So what do you think? You talk of paleo, you talk of how do you see it then when we do sort of invent fire and when we start cooking meat as opposed to having things raw, and we release all of these different and much more nutritious, dense versions of the meats and stuff. How do you feel in terms of looking at history? Do we get here and arrive here as we are now today without meat if we didn't eat the meat along the way?
No, I don't think so.
That's what always confuses me with it.
Yeah, because isn't there a study, but again, one of many, in these, it's induction. Everything we know, everything we think is true until we prove it wrong.
Yes.
And there's so many things in life we can't actually ever prove wrong or prove one way or another. That's why I try not to waste too much time arguing about them. But, I mean, I did read that, when we started cooking meat and having that, there's some evidence to support that we started getting a bit smarter at that point. We were becoming more. We sort of leveled up from being like this simple ape to what we are now. So I think maybe not. And actual fact, probably definitely not. That's a terrible sentence. But also, I think it's then just about like what we are. Our individual organisms inside ourselves don't understand what the collective is doing, and I don't think my body actually knows there's another 5 billion people on the planet now.
Yes.
So there is a degree of if we want to try and keep some sort of healthy balance with the planet, we might have to change things that we've inherently been doing and has been successful for us in the past. So I can't say that we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be like that. And actually, it comes back to how we were talking about how we think. At the start of this conversation, is like you don't go. I don't want to ever nail my colours to a flag. Just for the sake of potentially supporting or not sounding like I contradict myself. Because life is absolutely so often contradictory or appears contradictory until you break into the devil with that. So I don't know, I think it's a really good question though, Sam. Would we be here?
That's where I always sort of think, and I also think on the more sort of, that's sort of reflecting, looking back, and then when I think where we are today, I often think a lot of the kind of, again, that tribalism that's happened between vegans and meat eaters, and you've got the carnivore diet now as well, haven't you, which people are doing,
which has I think of most famously Jordan Peterson.
Went on it. And him himself as well. And I think it helped him with a load of autoimmune issues and so on and so forth. But what I find when I look at the whole vegan meat, which one these days, I think a lot of it feels like a lot of it's fueled by because we live in cities and because of factory farming and because of the way that the mass-produced nature of things has completely reshaped how we do it, because we want to live in these big grey, smoky hot spots, don't we? And the food that we eat when you live in the hot spot doesn't come from the hot spot. It's not grazing out on the field, and the local guy that's in the village who sells you your meat, who rears the meat and quarters the meat and sells you the meat, that's gone. You've got cattle in a line getting hormoned and steroided up to suit like those cheeky cereal people put in the preservative. They're shaping it. The whole thing, the whole process. Literally process is shaped. So I think a lot of the vegan I get that at the moment, you know, in our modern time of like, it's inhumane, it feels like. But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of us and we all want to eat food, and you just go in the supermarket and it's neatly packaged in a lovely little tray, and it's got, you know, and you're totally disconnected from how it got there. So it's a strange one.
It makes it easier. And also I haven't got a problem with animals dying. They can fucking die loads.
They've got to, haven't they? Everybody's got to.
Animals can die, and I've got humans in that group anyway. Do you know what I mean? I'm gonna die, but the manner of that death,
yes,
is an issue, and we have an entitlement to this food. That's what we think. So what I mean by that is, I realised this a couple of years back when I was walking down an aisle. I can't remember the supermarket. All of them do it, and there was 4 different types of steak, and I even think going back to my childhood, you couldn't have like 2 or 3 different versions of fillet, between fillet, the extra special version of fillet that the supermarket did, and then there's this other fillet. And I'm thinking, and that was fillet. Then you had rump, like
gradients of all
sirloin,
the cuts.
and you think, and then you're like, why should I have that choice? Like, so one of my biggest issues in this day and age is one of the tenets of capitalism. Not capitalism in itself either. So again, I think that's a nuanced argument, and people who just want to cling to like the more socialist ideals are blind. But one of my biggest criticisms of capitalism is the idea that customers king.
Yeah,
the customers are fucking cunt because they're a human. And the more, a bit like when I was a manager, the more I gave to my staff, the more they just felt entitled to.
Take, yeah.
When they don't. We don't have the right to just be like unlimited choice. Wait longer, have less, and stop building your life around these things because they're not important.
Create more meaning.
You know, have meaning. Do shit. That I said earlier, that pearl of great price that's inside you. Do that more instead of, you've been conditioned, and I hate to go too far down that route because it's just, you know, a conversation I had a lot. You've been conditioned a certain way to think what you should have and what you should like, and that. Listen to yourself and do some things that, like you say, children, how massively rewarding they are. I don't know where my kids are or if I've got any, but I assume I'll have a great time with them.
Is there plans? Because you and Molly are pretty settled on it at this point.
Together a while. Yeah, I guess so. I think we're looking to buy a place. I think that's the next step. And Molly's just graduated, but it's a shit time for graduates, like it is for all of us. But that's the challenge for a graduate.
Yeah.
And she's not 21, by the way, dude.
Right. 19.
She just exactly 19. She's a child genius. She's 16. She was a magician. So but I think it's house and then that stuff. It's a fucking big consideration. Like you know, people say, "Do you want to bring a kid in this world?" and stuff like that. I'm not that nihilistic. I'm happy with nihilism. Like, I'm comfortable with it.
I feel a bit like a nihilist. I feel like an optimistic nihilist, because if you listen to enough...
That's a great saying.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, in the end, if you do zoom out far enough and you listen to people like Carl Sagan's, you know, talk, or you listen to Terence McKenna's, or any of the psychedelic-minded people, you know, there's... Alan Watts is great for it because he kind of simplifies it, I guess, commonly for most people, but he mocks it almost of how simple this thing is, how beautiful it is, but how almost meaningless that it is. You know, like, you are just part of... I often think of that, and I think, well, the short, tiny little blink of an eye that we get, you have to squeeze it and enjoy it, and it comes back to what you said earlier about if you are lucky enough to have that moment, whether it was a documentary you saw, a book you read, a line someone told you, a moment of your behaviour, you managed to have enough introspection where you look at yourself and go, do you know what? Yeah, I'm a bit of a fucking dick, and I'm fallible, and I make mistakes, and you have that truth with yourself, and at that point you can kind of set yourself free a bit. I think at that point you can start to harness the idea that, yeah, enjoy this fucking momentary experience, and it allows you to have so much more gratitude and
Definitely.
And
it's the buzzword, man.
yeah, that's how I feel with it. And I don't know. I just think social media in this day and age, we're all shouting the odds at each other, and everybody's perfect and everybody's wonderful. And there's businesses now where you can rent your fucking car and your Malibu mansion and have a photo shoot and basically do your Instagram profile and get your followers. I mean, that's a VAT invoice business. I mean, that is mental, isn't it? So yeah, it's difficult to think about kids. Do you bring kids in? Bringing up the kids. How rewarding it is seeing these little blank canvases that again, like I alluded to earlier, like almost like I've got a second chance, not just for me to be better in a individual way, but understanding that my energy, my output had reverberating ripple effects, and the consequences of the energy that I expelled. I've got a chance to kind of double down on that, and not only am I trying to improve and be much more compassionate, much more understanding, far less volatile and so on, I'm actually getting to map my children with some of those qualities from the off. And
Absolutely.
My very podcast is born out of my own childhood, where broken family at like 7 years old, and a lot of unhealthy kind of back and forth between parents and not great, and learning that pattern and trying to break that pattern and being uber aware of it with my kids. But then I've got friends, that when I talk to them and they love the idea of having kids, but they think, I'm not sure in this world and what's happening and where it's going, if it's fair, if we should, and I get that dilemma. The one thing I would say is that when you say, I don't want kids, it's not for me, I find that difficult to kind of wrap my head around, because you just don't know. If someone puts your baby in front of you and you're holding it and those cells are you and that is the strangest thing I've ever contemplated, that. But I take my hat off to people who make that decision and say, do you know what? No, that I want to give back to the world by not overpopulating it, by not putting, more people into the world. Never mind, I don't want my child to experience this world. But that nihilistic take is tricky.
It's such a complicated argument, that even in child. So I would, and I think that ultimately, for all those reasons, I think that when I was a kid, well, not a kid, I guess by the time I was about 18, 19, I've been reading a variety of different books. I come to the conclusion my answer to the meaning of life was just to live. And there can't be anything more living than actually doing what your body's physiologically got planned for you. And I'm not trying to be, that almost sounds really quite conservative. I'm not trying to come from
No, I totally get that.
I just think that, it's natural. It's a natural thing. There's natural truths there. And that your body, like it is natural truth, feed it what it wants and it's going to make you feel the best version of you in the morning. And accept things like, Buddhism, I think, is probably the closest I've ever come to what I find is the most useful religion. Too. I think we discussed this previously, because it teaches, guess what, you're going to suffer a lot, number one, and also be grateful for shit. And the things as soon as you start doing that and you start forgiving yourself and realising that you can be fallible, you actually stop becoming such a dickhead, because you stop holding everyone else at that standard where they can't do anything wrong.
That's a great way of putting it. That's a great way of putting it.
You become I'm a lot less judgmental. And the people I know in my life who have got the most emotional trauma for things that they've done to other people that were really bad, that those people, they're victims, let's say. A bit of a strong word there. Makes it sound a lot darker than what it was. But it was bad. It was bad. It was for me, it was family stuff. They'd forgiven now. They don't really care. But the problem is that person can't even forgive themselves or acknowledge anything wrong. And you know what they are as a human being? Judgmental and fucking angry. And they have no idea that that's not normal now, because they've just built it up so much.
Just lost with it.
Absolutely. But I digress there. I can't wait to have kids. I don't blame people for not. But also the population thing, I think it depends where you are as well. I think the world's population's going up, definitely. I think we have a dangerous relationship with what we think we should have that isn't ours. But actually, I think in the UK, I think it's been going, like our head count's going. The UK's population is going up. I don't think that's from childbirth. I think that might be from
have a look,
things
see
like
if you can find that.
immigration. Yeah, please do. Jamie, pull that up for me.
Yeah, pull that up.
Aidan, nice to meet you.
Yeah. But no, I love that dichotomy is another thing that I arrive at, when I think about this, when I have these conversations, which is, you nailed it again, which is, it feels like to go through your natural cycles, and childbirth, to reproduce, let's say, broadly speaking, seems to be the fundamental reason for being here. Broadly speaking, like that.
Yeah, broadly, definitely.
Because that love, that unconditional love from parent to child is something I've experienced obviously now, and it is incomparable. It's a strange thing. It's of its own energy entirely. So where I'm stuck is that seems to be, if you are living in that mindful way, like you say, with that kind of Buddhist mindset, that this thing's you're suffering and it's temporary, and you've got to be grateful. That love, when you have a child, that reproduction, that creation seems to be the most rewarding thing I've ever been part of or privy to. But the argument would be that we're overpopulating, and that the problem is there's too many of us, and that is a fucking problem if that's the case, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess some people also, it's like people's intentions with having kids.
Yes,
if you're on your 20th or you're on your 10th, are you nurturing that kid?
Yeah.
Or was it just like, again, it was actually a departure from responsibility, and accidents happen. Most childbirth does. That's because sex is really fucking good. So I don't blame anyone for this. This isn't a discussion about contraception or abortions or anything like that. It's totally understandable. This is about, once you get to a certain number, then I think sometimes you've got to be like, oh. But I don't
feel it at 3.
Yeah, man. Well, it's really interesting all this subject you say, Sam, because my best mate, very honest guy, we were talking about how to think earlier, and he is a superb emotional thinker and logical thinker, and he's so good at separating the two, and he's a person I always go to for advice. And he always said when he had his kid, when he had 2, he's like, it's brilliant, it's all right. If I didn't have them, I think I'd still be just as happy in a way. He said, so I'm trying to be realistic here, but he said there's a thing that I can't tell you and I can't explain to you or articulate to you about how that makes me feel, that makes it completely worth it. And he's had, it's been difficult. It's been difficult sometimes for him as a parent. It is for everyone. They have the challenges. But he's always said that. And Mark is a much better person. This is a crazy thing to say, but I've said it to his face. Yeah. He's a better person for finding Kelly and then having kids. He fucking is. Yeah. Because he started giving him other meanings that I don't think Mark was finding in anything the rest of the planet was telling him to do, which again comes around to that. It's like you all these expectations of things that you think you want because you're told you want because there's money in it for someone somewhere down the line. But actually once he discovered that, it's by feeding others, he's nourished himself. And I think that's the great thing about kids. I mean, I don't know. I haven't had a kid, right? So I'm just. This is rampant guesswork and speculation.
Well, no, I think explaining what Mark feels there, that's kind of it. That nourishment, that's what I've felt. And I was looking for it. I was seeking it all over the place. And like every male, you get told, I'm pregnant. And what the fuck? What am I going to do? I mean, I was 32 years old. So, I'm mature at that point, and I'm in my skin, and but I'm kind of subliminally ready. We hadn't talked about it, but it was like, I know it's coming down the line, but man, you can never be ready. And I've got friends at the moment who have got, I can see, or at least I feel like they're at that point that I was at where they want that thing, but they're just scared to death of it, like the actual just saying yes, let's do it, because I want to get that and that lined up first, and then we'll be ready, and then we'll do it. And it's like, well, even when you've got it all there, it will still be the most, because it must be, because what is a bigger bit of news? You know, if you have kids, what kids have given to us, you know, in terms of the experience, what it means as a wider fucking nourishment. I've got a couple of friends, you know, who are kind of at that tipping point where they're searching for something, and I just feel like you are there, just let it be, do you know what I mean? But a couple more things to pile up, a couple more things to do. So, but again, coming back to the beginning of our conversation, I've got enough about me now to just keep it inside and just be an ear and be a shoulder, you know, and be like, well, what about if you just go for it, you know? I've managed to restrain.
There's a way to. I always feel now when I'm trying to help my mates think is to ask them open questions.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever have enough, or ever be ready?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's the solution in that instance, but I think it helps people. People don't really. It's called the eureka moment. You don't understand a subject until the penny drops. Like, I could explain to you a certain theory about something, and you could be able to repeat it back to me, but you still might not understand it. And it's only until you get that eureka moment when the penny drops that you can explain it in different ways and use examples, and that means you really understand it. And I think a lot of the time we don't really get that until we draw the conclusion ourselves. So sometimes I try that, but will you ever be ready for kids? And like if they're good together and they're solid together, then I don't know. Like children have been the destruction of relationships. They have been they can put unnecessary pressure when people do it to keep a relationship together or something like that.
Yeah, intention.
But like, if you're good together and you're mostly secure and you've been together quite a while, it might be fine. And there's loads of people who've had kids and that's really made them go up a notch. I know a lot of creative people, especially in the creative world, less so in my professional friends. Professional, I mean like, say like the white collar friends.
Yes.
They seem to have a less of a panic about this. And it has less of an impact in a way. But for my creative friends, it actually has made their creativity really come out, because they almost feel that they've got to get it done. No. Instead of like having this unlimited deadline.
Yeah. I totally feel like that. And I think when you say if you and your partner, you know, when you're about to have children, if you feel good, if you're on solid ground, if you're comfortable, if you really are in it together, you know, and the timing's right. I mean, because that's just what happened for me and my wife. It was like, it was just the thing. It was the thing that was missing. You know, the timing was just right on her narrative and on mine. And although I had that like, whoa, what the fuck? Right, okay. And I, you know, right, okay, get it together. And I did get it together, and I spent time, and because I was 32 and not 22, you know, I did jump on the internet and I saw out, like, I came across psychologist Gabor Mate, who is amazing if you know his work. I mean, his whole thing is about trauma, but he talks about, I think I came across him actually in Zeitgeist 3. Is it Zeitgeist?
Well, I haven't seen Zeitgeist 3 actually.
It was really interesting because it was all about environment. So it had been in context with this conversation actually, but it's well worth a watch. But it was him who stuck out to me, and I got on his work. But he was talking about in utero and how baby in utero is so sensitive to everything. The nutrition, the food, the stress of mother, the conversations, the voices, the music. And I just happened to be like, right, in that mindset where I just went on it, right, okay, well, and from day one I knew, my wife, who was game for me coming on these YouTube rabbit holes and stuff, you know, she wasn't like over, and again, this sounds trivial and silly, she's not just watching Corrie, you know, and like, here's me on my laptop and shouting, oh, yeah. She was like, okay, let's have a look, you know, and she was keen, she was game to see. And then when she was listening to Gabor Mate speak, or whichever psychologist or whichever doctor or researcher, she was like, oh, wow. And then before you know it, we're going to bed every night. We're talking to them. We name them early. And we were calling them by the names. I was playing Alan Watts at night. So when we were going off to sleep in the bed, we had Alan Watts playing at night. So we were listening, obviously, for our own benefit. But like knowing that all of this stuff is going in. So I was really lucky in that way. But my point is that my wife and I were like scared, but like, okay, let's do it. And for us, it's been it's been a blessing. It's been a real blessing. It's been the piece of the pie that, for a couple of quite anarchic and destructive people that we have been, my wife and I, it seems to have given us that level of responsibility and meaning and binding. That's hopefully what you're seeing when you have a look on the old Instagram and stuff.
When I'm having a good old stalk.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's really nice. I do think children is it's one of those scenarios that I think shows your true colours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you can come from any background, and I know people from all sorts of backgrounds, and it hasn't always dictated their behaviour and their qualities as an adult. And I definitely think when you have kids, I think it does show what qualities you have. And anyone who's listening thinks, oh, fuck off, Chris. Yeah, I haven't always been the best parent. That doesn't mean to say that there's not good, that there's not a reasons for your behaviours. It links back to like what we've said in the start. But, if you do think there's things there that you're sour about or you're angry, learn to forgive yourself. But it doesn't mean to say lie to yourself about it either.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah, I don't know. If I become a parent, I really hope that I'm one of. I hope I step up.
Listen. I have a lot. Like I've said this to Stu when Stu came on to the chat. Your trusty sidekicks of one another. I watch Stu. I see Stu as a really good dad. I see Stu as, and by that I mean, there's different ways to measure, from whatever perspective, whatever layer in the cake you're from, But for me, it's just that commitment to being there with them, just wanting to be in the experiences,
presence.
Whatever they are, presence. Whether it's they're my kids' age when they run in and they've just drawn their 15th dinosaur.
Sorry, I just meant presents, like just buying stuff, but never be home.
Just sackfuls of gear. No, I mean just being there. That seems to me, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory syndrome. That is to me. I just think of Charlie and his granddad who've got fucking not a pot to piss in. Right, and they go in the factory, don't they? And there's all these kids from the different classes, and they've got all the money or they've got all the whatever. But those two are together. They're bonded. They're sharing an experience. Yeah. They're not wanting for this, wanting for that. They're just, and that's what I see that in Stu, and I feel like that's what I'm striving at. And I feel like that, and it's funny you mentioned creatives. The fact that you see the creatives that are kind of in your friend circles that are kind of taking this side of that on. Like, I feel like that's what it is. It must be something to do with that right hemisphere or something. I don't know.
Got to raise your game. Yeah, definitely.
Something like that. Well, how's it looking for you podcast-wise then? So in terms of your podcast, Hardcore Listing, you guys are pumping podcasts out. I mean, the Patreon's popping. I just don't know how you do it.
Stu's a compulsive podcast. He's got like about 12 others at the moment. But Hardcore Listing is going great. We're patrons, we're really enjoying that. I think we're growing more in Patreon than anywhere else really these days.
Right.
And we like that. I think it's a new way you can earn a living, right? And it's like, I think a long time ago, when I saw Patreon and sort of versions of that before, I was like, what? You're gonna, like, some people put out content for free and then you just say, hey, pay us if you want.
Yeah.
I couldn't get my head around that. It does seem quite inverse, like, and especially in the past. But technology and lifestyles are changing, and I think people sort of like, there's new ways people understand that they want to finance what they enjoy, and they don't have to pay for it, but then it doesn't exist. And I think podcasts like me and Shu have, which can be quite rude, really, especially like the Patreon versions. We might not always get the sponsors that other people will, because maybe it'll be a bit too grotty or rude.
But it's staying true to podcasting for me. That's what I love about it. You guys aren't holding back. You just tell it as it is, and I think that introspection, that truth that we talked of in a more philosophical, serious way. Yeah. Like, I know you guys trade off of being fucking just a pair of dafties having a crack.
Yeah.
And that is what it is. Not because that's what you are, but because that's what we all are, and you're just happy to just be that and not have to be. It's just easy listening, truthful and real. That's what I love about podcasting. I love that. I think that's what is the magic of podcasts. But like everything, the big business gets bigger, and then we start refining it to suit the front of house, and so I totally get the Patreon thing. I mean, I've been a patron of you guys for a while. I've been a Patreon of a couple in America that I love. bamboozled me at first because I thought, hang on a minute, I'm listening to Joe Rogan or whoever it is for 3 hours at a time for nothing. And then this little podcast I quite like, but I'm not sure if I'm going to hand over £2 or whatever. But actually, as we move through the times, and as you alluded to before when we talked about maybe communities being smaller is more beneficial, it feels like it's happening a little bit in podcast community to me. Like people are paying Patreons and that's somehow refining their diet, refining their intake because there's more of a commitment. Like when you bought a record as opposed to just streaming a link. You're going to listen to that record whether you think you've hit a bum note and fucking hell, I'm not that bothered about it actually, but I'm listening to it because I bought it. It feels like maybe a bit more, I don't know, ownership of what it is you're consuming a bit again.
The fewer people you're worried about appeasing, and because you want to be bigger. Because the thing is, there is an argument to say if you soften certain things, maybe you'll start appealing to a wider market, and that could be on any subject. Widen the nature of what you talk about, for example. You can do those things, but then you start to lose character. And I think also then things become homogenized, and that's why people will say, all pop music sounds the same because they're kind of aiming for such a wide market, such a wide part. They're gonna try and tick all the same boxes. So if you keep yourself true to yourself, you've got a better product there, I think, and more people, not more people, but the people that are going to want to listen to it are going to stay with you, and I think that's more important than anything else. I'm saying that because we've got 2 listeners.
Well,
basically.
you haven't.
One of them, my mum's the other.
You've hit over 1 million downloads.
Yeah, we've done that now. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's amazing, man. That's amazing. Is that mind blowing to think that?
It is, because if you was to think of that as in terms of stadiums, that would can you imagine how many stadiums that would fill?
It's fucking mental, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, who's heard us talking about babies with big dicks or something like that.
That's how I mean. It's just. I mean, I've been using that technique actually. As I've been starting to grow in the lockdown, I've chosen to use the lockdown time and take my podcast into video, and. It's a long, slow burner trying to build YouTube, like it is anything, and you've got to keep digging and keep shoveling, and, you do a podcast, or I've done a podcast.
It looks great, Sam.
No, appreciate it. Thank you. And
it looks really, really good. Honestly, as soon as you started doing it, I said to Stu, fucking Sam's got his shit together there.
Nice
it looks really good.
I appreciate that. Well, and I know that, and again, the belief in I've been in bands for long enough that you just put it in, you keep shoveling, and if you believe in it, you're enjoying what you do anyway. That's why you're doing it.
Definitely.
But with the YouTube, it's like I do a podcast, and maybe there's 37 views on this podcast. We do a Friday night premiere, yeah. And then, but I've been I've been stopping at that point and going, hang on a minute. If there was fucking 37 people. 37 people have listened to that tonight, right? When we could have been doing this, because especially on the premieres, because they're stopping to watch it at that time, and then I think that's fucking mind blowing, really.
Yeah,
37 people, that's what 8 carloads or something, 10 carloads of people.
Dude, it's going back to being grateful and having some fucking. Perspective on things by doing that, and actually, instead of trying to look at something bigger and go, oh, why can't I be Joe Rogan? It's like that's going to put everyone off anyway. Doing it, do it because you love it, and massive. This is another thing that I've been reading a lot about recently about thinking is perspective. Changing your perspective lens can again free you from burdens that you've always worried about or whatever, or behaved in a certain way, but it can absolutely drive you on to being happy, and yeah, man, that's a very cool thing.
1 million downloads, 1 million downloads. That's amazing. So how you've been doing podcasts during this time? Have you done everything via kind of Zoom? Have you done any studio stuff?
Yeah, I don't think we have, mate. I think.
Have you not seen Stu then? Have you not been in the physical?
I had to go and knock on his door, and we even kept that socially distant.
Right.
Because I can't remember what I was picking up or dropping off. I think it was empty bottles for Love Beer.
Right. I remember something about it. Yeah.
Beer.co.uk.
I think he photographed you, didn't he, on the street or something?
Yeah, that's it. So, apart from that, mate, it's all been just doing it like this, and it's been really great. How have you fared with it all?
Yeah, well,
you've done a couple of opposite faces, or was that just before lockdown?
No, I did. I had a couple in the bank when lockdown was kind of a bit weird, and I was only just starting doing the video stuff anyway.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I just did stuff with my brothers. We did the Four Brothers stuff because obviously we're brothers, we're all family. The studio's an isolated place. We took a little bit of a risk, truth be told, but like I say, in my interpretation of podcasting, I was prepared to do that. We're four brothers. Yeah. We're in an isolated place. We hadn't come into contact with anybody else, and we wanted to sit and we wanted to discuss the madness. It felt important to try and get it down of what was happening, and I'm really pleased I did, because even now, just changing the SD card on the machine the other day, I had a quick flick through what was there, and had a quick listen to a couple of minutes here, a couple of minutes there of early podcasts, like when this whole thing started. Yeah. Because I know enough to know that we're going to be at a further point in time and look back at this shit and be like, what the fuck happened there? Yeah. That was as pivotal a time as any that were certainly in our lifetimes, but maybe in, modern history. It's, so I'm really pleased that we did have those. But other than that, I've done a lot in the studio. People with social distancing, like I say, it's an isolated studio. So I've been kind of pretty in touch with my normal routine. Which I think's helped me massively, actually. I loved being locked down. We had like 8 weeks or something locked down with just my wife and kids, which was amazing because it was like a recalibration. Like I think a lot of people got that from that initial lockdown where it's like, just stop. And the weather was blessed. I feel like there was something in that. Walks. It's great. Yeah, people waving at each other on the streets, everybody looking at each other, because it's almost like time slowed down for a minute. Yeah. That fucking hamster wheel we got off it for a minute and like, actually, yeah.
I could do life at this pace.
Yeah.
And then maybe at the 10-week mark, I started going a bit mental. And I definitely think my girlfriend was like, this was great, but now you are doing my head in.
Yeah.
And we need to actually see people. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing in terms of back to responsibility. There's so many different guidelines that were going out, and that wasn't me then going, right, well, you don't know, I don't fucking know what to believe, so I'm going to have a massive party. I think that's just people finding a way to feed what their ego wanted, their emotions talking, as it were. But I think we've done things, but we've always been like, right, let's do this. Let's judge this our own way, but let's make sure we're as responsible. Totally. Really responsible with it. So, doing that with your brothers and stuff like that. I mean, if you're thinking about it, I think there's nothing wrong with it. And I just wish more people would think about it and just either just blame the government for giving mixed messages, which they've been fucking terrible at. Let's be honest.
It's so confusing.
Yeah, without making it a podcast where we just talk about that, because you could. I think you just got to use some common sense and try and just be careful. And so nice one, man. I'd like to get back to it, but saying all this shit, I've got a live show this week.
Oh, so, yes, you have. How many folks will be at that then, do you think?
So it's the same venue that we always do, where the capacity is about 130 to 150.
Right.
But we're selling. We just said, look, there's 25 tables, which sit 2 people at each. So it's only 50 people.
Right.
So thankfully it's sold out.
Excellent.
But I'm literally going to go and do the podcast and be a real antisocial fucker as well.
Do you think it'll feel weird? Do you anticipate how you might feel, like sort of being amongst people and the energy level of people drinking and kind of? Is that? I wonder how it might feel.
I don't know, mate. I've got terrible willpower though. so the idea that this plan's going to stay the same. The only advantage at the moment is I'm not really. Well, I haven't drunk in 3 months. I've been doing the keto thing, and I've had one night of drinking on whiskey.
Do you feel good?
And fucking yeah.
Oh, excellent! You've been doing a lot of exercise as well, then.
Yeah, right. I can now run 5k, which doesn't sound a lot, but I couldn't do anything,
So have you got in a rhythm with the ketosis and stuff then? So. with your exercise?
Do that. Yeah, I start eating at 12 in the
Noon,
12
kind of,
midday, noon. Thank you for explaining the time of day. and then I finish at, I believe, 8 p.m.
Yeah, I'm about that. I'm about that. Yeah, I'm like 11, 7.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't eat till about 11, and we try and stop for about 7. Yeah, trying to hit that around 16 hours ish.
Yeah,
somewhere there. I mean, obviously, some days. I mean, what I do find, I don't know about you, but I find sometimes if I train hard, because I train in the mornings, what with my day job bits I do, I try and get stuff done in the morning, because at night I want to get in and be with the kids and not be in and out, and they're in bed and all that. But I find sometimes, depending on what the training is, I might get a bit lightheaded. I might get a little bit weaker feeling, and I notice that sometimes. But again, there's lots of variables that can play into that. But no, I'm my wife. We're in a real good rhythm of that, and I feel so much clearer for that. You know, not having hula hoops and God knows what at 11 o'clock at night, and then getting up and having that box of cereal that's full of vitamin C, apparently, you know, and actually that in at and kind of you're just always processing, aren't you? So yeah, it feels good. So you're training, you're ketoing, you're podcasting, live show on the way. It's all right. It's all right, isn't it? You know, and hopefully we're going to get some good news, and maybe people can start to relax a bit and maybe find our way back into whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully, and hopefully we'll do another one. So I absolutely, like when we did the last recording and stuff like that. And I think I spoke to you after that and just thought you're going to do great, man, because you just got a lovely manner, and and conversation just flows, man. So hopefully when this all comes to an end, maybe we'll have a trip and we'll come to your studio or something like that.
I'm going to hold you to that. I mean, I held you to this when I came on yours, that I'd get you on, and I think this is an exclusive having you on another podcast, because I don't even think you listen to podcasts.
I absolutely don't, mate. But, I have no interest in podcasts, which is the fucking weirdest thing ever. But
no, it's cool.
The thought of listening to a conversation kills me. I like having them, but I don't want to be a passive listener.
Well, I've been talking to Stu, and Stu wants to do the Peak District. So obviously he loves his wild swimming and that, and you guys went wild swimming, didn't you? So we're kind of knocking around an idea of getting him up here. So you guys come up here. I'll take care of you. We'll go have a nice wild camp and a wild swim, and we'll get in here and we'll have a little knock around in the flesh. That'd be lovely.
That is 100% a done deal, Sam. Absolutely, mate.
We'll work it out when the world gets back together. But listen, thank you, Chris Glasson.
Yeah, man.
You've been absolutely wonderful, as ever.
It's been a great chat.
Lovely. So take care of yourself.
Sam, you too, mate. You too.
And we'll speak to you again soon, brother.
Yeah, man. Take it easy, dude. Thank you.
Peace.